You started flying when you were 14. You were a fighter pilot as well, so a jet plane pilot. Do you think that the fact that you'd worked in the military helped with that moment?
Yes, I think everything I'd done in my life was available to me to be immediately accessible to make those important decisions so quickly in those seconds that we had. But being a military aviator absolutely provides one with a firm foundation, the discipline to have a professional attitude about everything that one does throughout your flying career.
But as a pilot, with all those hours in a simulator, the training that you do, how much training can you actually have, did you actually have, for that sort of occurrence?
Practically none. In our flight simulators, it was not possible to practice a water landing. The data don't exist, they aren't programmed for it. The only training we'd ever gotten for a water landing was a theoretical classroom discussion. So my first officer, Jeff Skiles, and I had, as it turned out, only 208 seconds to do something we'd never done before, get it right, never having done it. So much went so right so quickly is what was so remarkable about this event. We were able to take what we did know, adapt it, and apply it in a new way to solve this novel problem.
In 208 seconds.
208 seconds.
Because what's extraordinary about this is that there were so many variables that could have gone wrong. There were so many things that I mean, you can't even bear to think about the possibility of the catastrophe that it could have been, and yet it wasn't. And it was the confidence that you had. You knew that you were going to be able to land that.
I was confident I could find a way to solve each of these problems until finally we'd solved them all. But it required great focus because the stress after 30 years of airline flying, where we try so hard never to be surprised by anything, was so sudden, being confronted with this at such a low altitude. But I was confident I could find a way, along with my crew, to solve this problem.
So you've taken off from LaGuardia and you're on your way to North Carolina,
Yes.
to Charlotte, and you've just taken off, and it is a very serious double bird strike.
Yes, a large flock of large birds, Canada geese, wingspans almost 2 meters. Two into both engines, hit the whole front of the airplane. It was apparent immediately this was going to be the ultimate challenge of a lifetime. We had lost thrust. It felt as if the momentum of the airplane nearly stopped in midair.
And you, obviously, the first thought would be, right, OK, can we get back to another field?
I knew from experience there were only 3 options. Only 2 runways that might conceivably be reachable. It turned out with reaction time they were not. And the only other place in the entire metropolitan New York area, one of the most densely developed areas on the planet, where you could even attempt landing a large airliner, would be the Hudson River. Only place long enough, wide enough, smooth enough to attempt that. And I was glad to have that least bad option, and I stuck with it.
But the thing is, we've seen before, to horrifying extent, when a landing on water has been attempted and has gone terribly wrong. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yes, in fact, our air traffic controller, Patrick Harden, and I, it turns out, had that same mental image of that Boeing 767 that had been hijacked and run out of fuel off the Comoros Islands in mind, where it cartwheels into the water. So I was determined to keep the wings exactly level, to maintain control of the airplane all the way to touchdown. I just didn't know how hard a landing it was going to be because we hadn't done this before.
And the other thing you didn't know was how long the plane would stay afloat for.
I was confident if I could find a way to deliver the airplane to the surface intact, that it would float long enough for us to be rescued. And I landed between the ferry terminals in New York and New Jersey, the only place where rescue could happen fast enough on such a cold day.
What we see in the movie is you're a pilot, you're trained, you are going to say, it was part of my job, but, you know, for the rest of the world, we're allowed to say you were a hero that day, you saved all those people. It was incredible. And then we go, well, he's amazing, and we all move on with our lives with you in the back of our thoughts. But then the investigation starts. And that is the beginning of what turned out to be a very difficult time for you.
Absolutely, and for 15 months. As an accident investigator myself for the Pilots Union years before, I had helped to investigate an accident in which not everyone did survive. So I understood how critically important the investigation process is for us to learn from and make safety improvements going forward. That still didn't make it any easier to have to go through this process when I didn't know, none of us knew until the very end when the final report was released, if we would be vindicated, if all the choices we made were the best ones that led to the best outcomes. That was a very difficult process to have to endure. And while the people themselves weren't adversarial, the process certainly is. And there were powerful forces with their own interests, the aircraft manufacturer, the FAA, the airline, and their insurers who had their own agendas. And I was just me. with the pilots union to help me.
It was suggested, until finally it was understood not to be correct, it was suggested that you could have made it back to LaGuardia. It was suggested that one of the engines still had power.
In the early days, we were very concerned until all the evidence was in. If we had understood this situation correctly, were the engines irreparably damaged at the beginning? It turned out that they were. But until all the data had been analyzed, and until everyone had been interviewed, and until important decisions had been reviewed and validated, we were waiting for the other shoe to drop. We didn't know if our professional reputations would be ruined or reconciled.
If you enjoyed that, there's more of the same right here. And make sure you subscribe so that you never miss the best moments from this morning.